Hi, and welcome back to another AI in 5. I'm your host, Simon Chris. Joining me today is Scott Zoldi. Scott's the Chief Analytics Officer at FICO. And we're going to be talking about the impact that AI is having on fraud and the finance institutions. Hey, Scott, welcome to AI in 5. Thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Simon. Thanks for having me.
And it's great to have you in Australia. I know you're visiting at the moment. Your area of speciality is around the finance sector. And, one of the things that I've seen hitting that finance sector is just, overly complicated fraud. And I imagine AI is playing a part in that. What are you seeing? What's going on?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Simon. It's interesting. Fraud has been one of those areas that really drove AI adoption. So the first AI machine learning models were actually developed in the early 90s. And ever since then, fraud and AI have been tackling one another, right? The fraudsters get more and more sophisticated. The data gets more complicated. That complicated data needs machine learning models to interpret it. And it's a sort of cycle, right? But you're absolutely correct. Like I'm here in Australia and scams are becoming a very, very big problem, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a new type of crime. And that means the models have to evolve and they have to learn from the data that we see today. So those two are bedfellows for sure.
Yeah. Are the bad guys getting the upper hand? Is AI becoming too, AI-driven fraud becoming too hard to detect? Or is there still like a signature you can follow?
So, most of the defenses that the banks have are pretty good in terms of, two-factor authentication, in-app sort of purchases and tokenization. So just lots of technical barriers. The thing that criminals are taking advantage of now that it's too easy to fool us humans. And so they'll use like generative AI to pretend that they're a bank official. And so they've no longer, gone, after really, really technical hard things. They'll just try to convince you of sending money to a different country or do what we call romance scam, where you're believing that you're in a relationship, but actually they're trying to extract money. And so that's some of what makes it so hard is that the person on the other side is actually, part of that scam, and they've been convinced that they should send money to people. And so new AI models kind of differentiate between what you're likely to do or not likely to do with a high level of accuracy.
Yeah. Okay. And are they also using it just to do heightened like phishing attacks or direct data attacks at the banks and things?
Yeah, for sure. They leverage AI and machine learning to attack the bank infrastructures. They'll try denial of service attacks, and we see a lot of robo fraud where they'll just do lots of tiny little transactions so that they try to corrupt what the AI knows about you and the way you transact, so that maybe it's less effective. So they're always trying something new. Yeah, and so we always have to come up with new types of models and new types of mathematics and AI to tackle it.
And so you're working with the banks around, how do they prevent this? If I think about, people like me that aren't working in a bank, what can I be doing to kind of avoid this fraud? Is it just the usual, look for anything that looks suspicious, or is there something more I can be doing?
I think that one of the best policies is to be cynical, right? And so when people reach out to you, that they may not be who they think they say they are, right? And to be careful with your information, right? And these are two sort of really important aspects of kind of protecting yourself. A lot of it's education, right? And unfortunately, like when you look at scams, the elderly and disadvantaged get targeted more by these scammers. And so education and being very careful with your data is important. And then on top of it, getting alerts from your financial institution, right? If you want to be alerted when a financial transaction exceeds some dollar amount, that you get a notification. So I'd say always assume that fraud is out there lurking and trying to find a way to take from you. And being alert is good.
Yeah, it's that old "in God we trust, everybody else brings authentication." Yeah. In our last minute, what's the most elaborate fraud scheme that you've seen around the banking and finance?
So, one of the most elaborate are essentially what we call muling. And muling is essentially where people enlist their bank accounts to transfer money, right? So, like, let's say I steal money from you, Simon, and I'm going to send it to somebody else in Australia, and that person will send it to another person in Australia, and then someone will send it out to New Zealand, and then off to Kazakhstan, and eventually it gets to me.
Mm,
And so it's very elaborate because I'm trying to hide the trail. And so
mm,
if I'm going to steal from you and other people, then I need to make it as difficult as possible for banks to track where the money went, and so that I can get it and spend it and take off with the goods. And so one of the most complicated things is that because banks don't always collaborate as much as they should, in terms of these transactions going across bank boundaries, it becomes easier for fraudsters to go unnoticed, right, or undetected for longer periods of time. The banks are aware of this. They're looking to fix it, but that's one of the more sophisticated sort of schemes where you have to have mules all over the banking network
mm.
globally to do this.
Yeah, and that's going to take some kind of federated learning for the banks to work together, which is going to be, nigh on impossible in itself. Look, we're at time. This has been awesome. I'd love to ask you what I ask everybody on the show, which is what would be your one bit of advice for a company that's just starting out in AI? What should they be thinking about?
I think the main advice I would have for them is to take stock in what problems do they think AI would bring a good return on investment to what they're trying to do. So number one, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Number two would be, do you have the right people that understand how to use that AI? And number three is, what is the data that I have available to build these models? You need to collect data, right? So
Yeah.
AI is a reflection of that data. And if you take those three things in, you'll point at the right business problem, you'll have the right staff, and you'll start collecting the right data, and then you get the return on investment. I mean, after all, AI is in its kind of golden age, and so we just have to be more pragmatic about how we apply it, and you'll realize those benefits.
Great rule of three. Fantastic. Scott, this has been an awesome AI in 5. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Simon. Thank you.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.